These days, when we read articles in the mainstream media, the question we need to ask ourselves is not, why is this going on? In other words, we should not assume that what the article is saying is true and take it at face value. Rather, we should ask a different question. What is the underlying agenda behind this article? What is the ideological spin that the media is putting on this article? Here's a case in point. CNBC, which, by the way, is not the worst in terms of ideological bias, but they are carried by the cultural tide, and so they reflect the kind of left-wing presuppositions of the mainstream media. These are America's 10 worst states to live and work in 2023. And I'm thinking, very interesting. So let's start looking at these states, and they start with, they have Arkansas, they have Tennessee, they have Florida, which is a big surprise. They have Indiana, they have Missouri, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. First of all, right away, when you see Texas and Florida, you have to laugh out loud because it's inherently preposterous that those are two of the worst states to live in. In fact, I live in one of those two, Texas, and I can affirm that it's actually a very well-run state. It doesn't have the natural beauty, say, of California, but guess what? If you walk into the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles in California, if you walk in the morning, you're not going to get out until the afternoon. You walk into the DMV in Texas, you'll be out 30 minutes later. So the idea that somehow these are Texas and Florida are included in the 10 worst states, right away your antenna, your suspicions need to go up. But then you notice something else, and that is that as you go down the list, and many of these states are in the South, but not all of them, you realize every single one of them is a red state. Every one of them is a Republican state. And you go, wait a minute, are you saying that Republican states are inherently worse to live in than Democratic states? Now, there are some Democrats who do think this, but there is one kind of powerful kind of refutation to this theory, and that has to be contended with. If you're going to write an article, if you're going to claim that these are the worst states, then you have to deal with this problem. And what's the problem? Well, the problem is that people from the blue states are moving to the red states, and they are especially moving to Texas and to Florida. Now, why are they moving to Texas and Florida? At one point, Trump, in an effort to undercut DeSantis, goes, well, they're obviously moving just for the sunshine. I think they're moving for the sunshine and a whole lot more. They're moving to a very well-run state. They're moving to a state that has economic opportunity, upward mobility, ethnic diversity, not diversity in the ideological sense, but you've got Cubans, you've got Venezuelans, you've got blacks, you've got whites, you've got older people, you've got young people. So it's diverse in all kinds of ways. Crime rates are relatively low, particularly, now crime rates are higher in some of the Florida cities, but they're still lower than cities elsewhere. So it makes sense. People are voting with their feet. You might have heard the phrase, well, you've heard the phrase, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but there's a kind of play on that. Immigration is the sincerest form of flattery. And if people are emigrating away from blue states and toward red states, that tells you something. So you would think that these CNBC guys would be like, yeah, we got to consider, because what they're really saying is that the people who are moving, say, from California to Texas are wrong. They're fools. They should stay in California. It's a better place to live. And then when you begin to read the article and the fine print, you begin to realize that this article is itself a joke, because it's not looking at the things that really matter to people. In other words, it's looking at things like climate ideology and what is the state doing to combat the climate crisis. Well, number two, they're looking at they're looking at the trans issue. Is the state hospitable to trans people? Well, I mean, if you're writing in the trans magazine and you want to tell trans people where's the best place for trans people to live, that's a whole different thing. But why would it affect non-trans people as to what policies a state has toward trans people? So here's a classic example of how the criteria, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. You set up, this is like the climate models themselves, by the way. You set up a set of criteria. You feed data in that plays to that criteria. Another one, by the way, a big one for CNBC, abortion rights. So obviously Texas, because Texas basically outlaws abortions at this point as a practical matter. Florida has restrictions on abortion. It's not a complete ban. I think it's a 15-week limit on when you can have an abortion. So the idea is that these southern states are more pro-life, they're more anti-abortion, and therefore they limit your reproductive rights. So guess what? You may not want to move to that state. Look, if you're looking to have an abortion, maybe don't move to those states or travel someplace else. But the idea that the state itself becomes unlivable because it's not providing these abortion rights, just again, preposterous, laughable. The whole thing is a big joke. So what happens now here is that you begin by, in the old days, we'd read an article and we'd be like, wow, this is very interesting. Let's debate the facts as described in the article. But now I read the article and I'm thrown back to who wrote the article? What's the media outlet that put out this propaganda? What is their underlying agenda? And let's ferret it out. So this is a kind of new way of reading. It's also obviously a new way of watching TV. Never assume when you go on CBS or you go on PBS or listen to NPR. Oh, it's very disturbing. And Debbie was telling me this morning, that there's reports that it's indubitable that the spike in temperatures across the South is the result of man-made climate change. Again, instead of going, yeah, of course it is, or what can we do about it? You now ask, wait a minute, this is the middle of the summer, and it's probably going to get a little bit hotter. And then there are hot days, and then there are cooler days. So if the heat is explained by climate change, what about the cooling trends? And eventually it's going to get cool. And what if we have a cold front in the fall? And what if we have a severe winter? So how is this data being manipulated? That's the point to make. And I think we see it very dramatically in this article about the blue states and the red states. I think the simple fact that people are moving from blue to red tells you pretty much all you need to know. Bank failures, record inflation, spy balloons, mass layoffs. It's a recipe for disaster if your investments are unprotected, if they're with a typical financial advisor. But my friend Rebecca Walser is different. You've seen her on the podcast. She's a wealth strategist, a tax attorney. She has her global MBA from the London School of Economics. Rebecca told her clients to get out of equities back at the end of 2021. She got it right when most advisors got it wrong. And well, who had to pay the price? You as the consumer. So don't let blind loyalty or habit leave you losing money. Call Rebecca Walser's office today to protect your wealth from the market uncertainty. Debbie and I did a call with Rebecca's team to talk about our investments, and you should too. Go to friendofdinesh.com to book a call with Rebecca's team today. That's friendofdinesh.com to protect your investments and your future.